Welcome to Forum 360. This is Leslie Ungar, your host today. Thank you for joining us for our global outlook with a local view. Dog is man's best friend. We have all heard the saying, and many of us, like me, believe it. But what if a dog has a job charged with helping young lives? What if a dog can affect the welfare of a whole family? What would be a title to describe those duties? Today we have two two-legged guests and a four-legged guest. You could say the Summit County Courthouse is going to the dogs. First it was Avery, and now Trotwood has joined the pack. The furry friends are part of an effort to make court proceedings less intimidating for children. The Summit County Prosecutor's Office began using Avery in August of 2013 to sit with children who testify in criminal proceedings. A couple of years later, Trotwood joined the courthouse in the area of domestic relations. Children can be the collateral damage in court cases, and Trotwood is doing his best to make court and court appearances a more pleasant experience. Two magistrates who use Trotwood in their proceedings join us today. Owned by Magistrate Maureen Foley and used in her courtroom and in the courtroom of Magistrate Ron Cable. Welcome to our two-legged and our four-legged guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
I have been so excited to meet Trotwood. Not that I wasn't excited to meet you, but I've been so excited to meet Trotwood. Now, do the children and families that come to you, do they know in advance that there's a Trotwood, or do they find out once they get there?
They generally find out once they get there. We take the dog out to the lobby and check with the parents to make sure there's no allergies or fear of dogs, and the child meets the dog at that point in time.
So they didn't get to look forward to it like I did. I
Right.
got to look forward to this for weeks and weeks and weeks. First, tell us, and I'm going to ask each one of you, tell us what kind of proceedings take place in your courtroom so we can get a better idea as to the role of Trotwood. So, Maureen, what kind of proceedings take place in your courtroom?
Well, Ron and I both hear the same type of cases, although Ron's the chief magistrate. But we hear domestic violence cases, parentage cases, child support issues, pre-decree and post-decree divorce issues. But we only use Trotwood in what we call in-camera interviews, which would be an interview with just the magistrate and the child. And if there's a guardian ad litem on the case, then the guardian would also be present, and Trotwood.
And what can you add to help us understand the kind of proceedings that Trotwood is involved with?
Well, I've been with the court, for quite some time now, and I've always sort of grappled with the idea of, how to make children feel more comfortable. Trotwood sits in when we interview children in what's called an in-camera interview, and either we decide to bring the kids in, or one of the party's attorneys will request an in-camera interview. Once it's requested, we have to interview the child. So basically, it would be myself, Trotwood. If there's a guardian ad litem appointed, that means somebody that investigates and determines or recommends what's in the best interest of the child, and Trotwood would sit in the interview. Most of the cases where we interview children are either custody cases or domestic violence cases.
Now, help me understand something. You are magistrates. What is the difference between a magistrate and a judge? Because I have to tell you, I took a client to small claims court that owed me money, and I had a magistrate, and I got to tell you, I was just as nervous in front of a magistrate as I think I would have been a judge. So I didn't know the difference. Tell us the difference between a magistrate and a judge.
Well, we all wear robes, we all hear the same cases, but the judge appoints the magistrate. So the administrative judge is Maureen and I's boss. We were appointed by the judge, and we work at their, we work for them.
And do you decide, like, the result of the court proceedings the same way as we think of a judge making those decisions?
Right. We make the decision, write the decision, send out the decision, and there's an extra step in the appeals process when we hear the case as opposed to a judge. So when I issue a decision, if one or both parties isn't happy with that decision, they could appeal it to the judge, and then it would go to the Court of Appeals. Whereas when the judge makes the decision, it goes straight to the Court of Appeals.
I see. Now, where did the idea of using a dog in any kind of court proceedings come? I mean, if we go around the country, are there dogs in other cities and other court houses?
I believe that we're the only domestic relations court I know in Ohio, I'm not sure around the country, that has a comfort dog for children. Avery works with victims, so to speak, and there are some other dogs around the country that work with victims as Avery does, but I believe Avery is the only service dog in the state of Ohio that works for victims through the prosecutor's office.
So the idea of using a dog like Trotwood outside of the courtroom, can you take us through how did that come about?
Well, you know, I've met Avery, and like I said, I have grappled with the idea on how to make children feel more comfortable. So I wanted to start a therapy dog program, and you know, we were trying to find grants and so forth, and then you know, I got to talking with Maureen, and she explained that she was taking Trotwood through the doggy brigade at Akron Children's Hospital, and I was like, this is a great fit because Maureen, you know, already owns Trotwood, and she was willing to you know, to have Trotwood work with our kids at the court. So Trotwood has his own docket. He comes in 1 or 2 afternoons a week.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. So he comes in 1 or 2 afternoons, and he does the doggy brigade too?
Yes, he has a part-time job and he volunteers on the weekend, like I like to say.
He's a pretty busy dog.
Yes.
Like leading a normal dog's life would be rather boring to him, wouldn't it?
I think so.
So he comes in 1 or 2 afternoons.
And I have a crate in my office.
Okay.
So if I have a hearing and he doesn't have anything scheduled, he has a place to go. And then he'll spend time in the crate, although he doesn't spend very much time. As you might imagine, that my office is pretty popular when Trotwood's there. And and then when we have our child interviews, he comes into, well, usually what I'd like to do is sit in the courtroom beforehand, kind of get him used to the area, get him comfortable, and then he sits near the child during the interview. The child pets him, gives him a couple treats. The magistrate who's interviewing the child usually starts by asking about pets. It's a real nice icebreaker, as you might imagine, and it just goes really smoothly.
Now, you said that you ask parents, has anyone ever said no? They didn't want their kids to meet Trotwood?
No, most of the people that come through the domestic relations court are good people going through a difficult time. They want their children to feel comfortable. So we've always had yes answers, and the kids light up, and you know, they're excited to meet Trotwood. And then, as you know, Maureen had mentioned, it just eases in the transition of sometimes having to ask them difficult questions.
Has anyone ever been scared of Trotwood?
Not yet.
No,
I can't
As you
imagine.
might
He's not real scary looking, but you know.
No, he's not. But if kids are scared, I thought maybe it could do 2 things. It could get kids over being scared, and it could. Now, what do you think makes a dog good for these kind of interactions?
Well, you know, it's truly amazing. The first time we ever used Trotwood was on one of my cases, and a child came in, and Trotwood greeted him, and he fed Trotwood a treat. We allow that a couple of times, and he sort of, it's almost like he knew that he had a job to do. He just sat right in front of their feet, and you know, the child, you know, would pet Trotwood, you know, as we were interviewing him. So I think it's just his demeanor. I mean, Trotwood is a very laid-back dog, and you might want to add to that, Maureen.
Yeah, I know when I was going through the process at the Doggy Brigade, the training process, what I heard over and over again is you can train a dog all you want, but either the dog has a personality for therapy work or comfort work, or they don't. And I think Trotwood was just born with that personality.
Now, is it hard for any of the kids to say goodbye to him when they have to go?
I haven't noticed that.
No, I mean, they seem to enjoy spending some time with him, but they're usually ready to go on about their day. You know, even with Trotwood there, you know, the interview process still is hard for kids sometimes, because even if there aren't any special circumstances or difficult or delicate issues, I should say, you know, kids still feel in the middle between their mom and dad, and they know when they have to come in and talk to us that sometimes whatever they say, they feel like they're in the middle of their parents' conflict.
Sure.
So they're usually ready to go, but certainly Trotwood makes their time with us a little easier.
Now, without any names, is there a specific case or a specific child that you could tell us about, that how Trotwood kind of intervened and helped throughout the process?
Yeah, I mean, the first case I had with them was probably the best, and we've used them several times, but the child came in, and the questions we were asking the child had to do with one incident, but I believe that Trotwood made the child feel relaxed enough to tell us about some other incidents that were going on in the family that were really pretty disturbing. So anyway, I can't really get into the details
Sure.
of that, but I believe that he felt comfortable enough with us and with Trotwood to really open up and tell us what was going on in his household.
Now, when Trotwood comes to work, on the 2 afternoons he comes to work, do you know at that time whether he's going to be used or not?
Yes, I do.
You know he's going to be used?
Yes, I do.
Now, the 2 days that Trotwood comes, do you notice any difference? Does he know he's going to work those days?
Well, when I go home at lunch to pick him up, I brush him and I put his scarf on, and he just seems to know. He gets very excited, and so he seems to know, and he seems to be thrilled.
Now, does he only wear the scarf when he's going to work or
Well,
volunteering?
I only let him wear the scarf when he's either going to the doggy brigade, and he has a scarf for that, or a different scarf when he's coming to the court.
So that's kind of his way of knowing that he's going to work.
Yep, his cue.
That's interesting. Now, if we're fortunate, we have not been in your court, or our family has not been in your court, or our children have not been in your court. So what would surprise someone that has not been in court about your overall proceedings? Or what is there something that you'd like us to know about your overall proceedings?
Well, one of our philosophies that has evolved over the years is, we really try to settle cases. I mean, certainly my personal belief and the belief of most of the staff members at the court that, if we get families, if we help guide them make their own decisions, they're more often they'll stick with what they've decided, and they usually leave us happier, and they're less likely to come back to court. So we're really settlement oriented. We want to see families move on, and hopefully they don't need our services any longer, and all is well.
Now, let's look at the judicial world from a little bit broader perspective. You don't run for magistrate, you're appointed.
Right.
Now, is this something that is like a job for life? Do you plan on staying as a magistrate for a long time, or is it something that you do for a shorter time on your way to something else?
Well, I plan on staying at the Domestic Relations Court, hopefully until a ripe old age. It's been my life's work, and the next step obviously is to run for office. Carol Dezo's retiring this year, and I'm running for her seat, so I plan on staying.
Okay,
at
so
the
you
court.
are. So this will be your first election
Yes,
that you are running
for domestic relations.
Okay,
yes.
now I have to ask. My guess is that the people that vote for judges are it's probably a lower number than vote in other races, and for sure a less educated. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you about the difficulties of running for a judge. Today we have two-legged guests and a very special four-legged guest, as we are talking about the domestic court in Summit County, and we have Trotwood, our four-legged guest, who is a therapy dog for kids going through some difficult times, and we have two magistrates. We have Maureen Foley, and we have Chief Magistrate Ron Cable. So it seems to me, out of all the people that run for office, that being a judge of any kind and then running for office has to be so difficult, because during the day you get to kind of be in control of a courtroom, and then when you're running for office, then you have to say, oh, please vote for me. It's got to be very difficult, yet I don't know a better way. I don't know that judges for life is better than electing them, but it seems to me, we don't know that much about people we vote for.
Well, I think that it's important, for voters to research who the judges are, wherever they live, whether it be a municipal court judge, a common pleas judge, the Court of Appeals, because oftentimes people, they receive a lot more information about, say the presidential election, or somebody's running for U.S. Senate, than they do about their local judges. But at least in my opinion, it's certainly an important job and affects the lives of many. And I think that it's important that people make educated decisions when they're voting for the judges and for all of the local office holders.
Now, what qualities would you say were important in a magistrate or a judge that you would want voters out there are going to be in an election year, election fall pretty soon? What do you think are qualities that are important in a magistrate or a judge?
Well, certainly experience, especially experience with this area of the law. Compassion is important. A good relationship with the bar is also important.
Anything that you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the candidate has to have experience in what they're trying to achieve. Oftentimes, maybe somebody has a name that sounds like somebody else's name, and they may win an election but have no idea what they're doing. And certainly, compassion is very important, and also, accountability. People need to be held accountable for, in our court anyway, for being able to raise their children and paying support and all of these things. So, yeah, I agree with Maureen that I think that it's certainly important to have a mixture of compassion and holding people accountable.
If you had a magic wand and you could just wave the magic wand and it would work, what one change would you make in families?
Well, that's really a good question. I think that sometimes people give up a little bit too soon, and I think that the folks that that do end up going through the divorce process, I would really change the way they treat each other. It's difficult, personally. At a young age, I went through a divorce, and I understand that it's not easy. But it's important that parents really do try to work together for the best interest of their children. And oftentimes all the fighting and conflict causes children to have all sorts of issues later. So we know it's not necessarily the divorce that affects the kids, but it's the conflict that parents have during the divorce and after the divorce that negatively affects children. So I would have, if I had the magic wand, I would have families reduce the conflict that they have with each other.
And is there anything that you could add, or is that just so strong that there's nothing to add to that?
Well, that's an excellent answer, and I would just go back to what Ron said earlier about the importance of settling cases and trying to reach an agreement with your partner. We're seeing people who are going through what was probably the worst year of their lives, and sometimes they can't seem to see out of the short term, but if they can just try to take the long view with regards to their children and try to reach an agreement, I think that would be something wonderful if we could see more of that.
And we have a mediation process that's set up for all the cases that come through the court that have to do with children's issues. And I could at least speak for myself and also Maureen that we do treat people with dignity, and we really are try to be patient with them because we understand that it is a difficult time for them.
Now let's go back to that magic wand. If you had a magic wand that worked, what one change would you make in the judicial process? Is there a change that you've observed in your role as magistrates that you would if it was possible to just make that change without any kind of approval from the bar or from citizens or whatever? Is there a change that you would want to make in the judicial process?
Do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Oh, well, I before I came to the court, I worked for legal aid for 4 years, so I'm very dedicated to legal representation for all people, and if I had a magic wand that could truly do anything, it would be wonderful to see counsel for every single party that came in.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. It's sometimes very difficult for people to represent themselves, and it would be nice if more people had access.
I thought I could do that. I thought I had watched enough legal shows in my lifetime that I thought I could represent myself. Oh my God, it is so hard and scary.
Very difficult.
You guys are very scary.
We always encourage people to try to seek legal representation if they could afford it. And it would be nice if more people had access or funding for our guardian ad litem program. Certainly we have a great program, but there's a cost to it, and not everyone is able to afford it. And we do there are some pro bono opportunities that our guardians will help with, but I think more funding would be nice.
I know that this next question probably could spawn enough for an entire show on its own, but we hear a lot about the heroin epidemic, and we hear a lot about the heroin epidemic in our own county. How does that affect, or do you see the effects of that with families and children that end up in your courtrooms?
Well, I certainly do. I mean, I've had many cases where the teenagers or young adult children of folks that are coming through the divorce process have heroin addictions, and it creates a tremendous stress on the family. Also, we handle all the domestic violence cases, and unfortunately, we have a fair number of cases where children or grandchildren are violent towards their parents or grandparents, really for the sole purpose of getting money to feed their addiction. So, can be a very sad and stressful situation.
Now, the Supreme Court vacancy has gotten more attention than most Supreme Court vacancies have gotten because of the timing of it and the politics of it. So we have an open seat on the Supreme Court. Who is on the Supreme Court, does that affect you doing your job? Or does the fact that there is that vacancy, does that affect you doing your job? Or is that something that is just, kind of in Washington and doesn't affect you?
Well, sometimes, as we know with the recent decision for same-sex marriages, we do have decisions that come from the U.S. Supreme Court that do affect us, and certainly we're handling those cases now, and we wouldn't be unless it was for that decision, not in that fashion anyway. We handled those cases prior to the Obergefell decision, but now we handle them without any issues with appeals. So yeah, sometimes there is a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court that does affect our docket.
I would agree with Ron. On a day-to-day basis, I think the 9th District Court of Appeals probably affects our decisions more than the Supreme Court.
Now, in the remaining minutes that we have left, I want to ask you a question. Sometimes we forget that whether it's judges or, senators or people that we hold in high esteem, we forget that you're just people too. So what is something that you like to do outside of work that you just like to do, or perhaps might surprise us because we forget that you're human? So I'll start with you, Ron.
I like fishing. I have a 10-year-old son, and him and I love to go fishing, and my dad goes, and a lot of times in the spare time I have a little boat, and we'll go out, and that's what I like to do for fun.
And Maureen?
Well, I like to hike with Trotwood. Trotwood and I have probably hiked all over the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. So yesterday we were on the Wetmore Trail. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
yes. The Humane Society used to be down
exactly
that way, so yes, I do remember that. Now, we talked about you're running for office for the first time, so let me just ask you, just real quickly, we really haven't kind of geared up to, I suppose, where it will be as we get closer to the general election, but is there anything that has surprised you so far in running that you wouldn't have known had you not been a candidate?
Well, the work never ends, so there's always, one more person to contact, or, one more task to complete when you're running for office. It's a very busy time, and it can be very stressful, but also very rewarding. I've got to meet a lot of really good people, and I do enjoy the process, although sometimes it gets a little tiring.
Now, in just a word or two, in colleges, professors can now turn in grades online. They can do it all from their computers. So do you see a time in our lifetime that people will be able to vote online?
I mean, I wish that were the case. It would be a lot easier on everyone. So I don't know what the future will hold, but I would be for it. And
would you be for that?
Certainly.
And I would let Trotwood vote too.
Yeah.
I think I would trust Trotwood.
I think Trotwood would vote for me, but
I'm sure he would.
You just heard it here first.
I'm sure he would.
The Summit County Courthouse has the benefit of a new four-legged member, Trotwood. Trotwood, or Trotty, has one job: one goal in life besides being cute, and that is to make the lives of kids under the stress of a custody or visitation or domestic violence cases, to make their life better. By doing this, Trotwood helps make this community a better community. Trotwood has had some human help in doing his job. So thank you to our guest, Domestic Relations Court Magistrate Ron Cable and Magistrate and Trotwood's owner, Maureen Foley. Dogs are not our whole life, but they make our lives whole. Trotwood has been here with us today, and Avery is back at the courthouse doing his job. They do their part to make the lives whole of children, that's fine, to make the lives whole of children that are going through a domestic court process. Now you know that in addition to being adorable, Trotwood is part of the fabric that makes Northeast Ohio such a great place to live and to work. Thank you for joining us today. We are co-sponsored by the Shaw Jewish Community Center. I'm Leslie Ungar for Forum 360, a global outlook with a local view. And Trotwood, we thank you.
Forum 360 is brought to you with support from Electric Impulse Communications, Kim and Harvey Nelson, Rubber City Radio Group, Acronist.com, Hudson Cable, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Forum 360 supporters, and the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron.